Welcome to the Bourbon Van. I'm Phil.
I'm Julie. This is the top 11 bourbons to drink in 2025.
We came across this list on the Men's Journal website, and the link to check it out for yourself is in the description of this video. But we thought that the categories were interesting for the most part, and while we thought that they made several really good picks for their bourbons, we wanted to offer an alternative or two for each of these categories.
First category, best overall bourbon.
Yeah, best. Okay, so we're gonna start with the absolute best overall. Woodford Reserve Double Oaked is what they chose, and this is, yeah, wildly popular whiskey. So I understand, I think, a lot of why they went with this. Not necessarily our favorite whiskey here.
No, to me, it's like so desserty that you just have to have it at a time and a place. Very fudgy, very chocolatey.
There is a very similar whiskey to Woodford Reserve Double Oaked, in fact, also produced by Brown-Forman, that we prefer a little more strictly because it brings a spice to the party that balances things out a little bit more. Still very sweet. It's Old Forester 1910. This one, again, a double oaked whiskey, but what we like about it is that it seems to combine all the flavors of a delicious banana split with a little touch of oak. And then if we're going to talk about just straight up bourbon, things that aren't double oaked, we actually have something that we prefer, each of us, as best overall bourbon that you can find readily available out there.
If you're going for something that's not super desserty, I would go with Russell's 10. It's good for any level of bourbon drinker. It's got a great oak presence. It's only 90 proof.
Yeah, Russell's 10, obviously something that is accessible out there, readily available out there, and Wild Turkey produces some of the best whiskeys at the best value, and that's actually where I'm going on this one too. Rare breed, Wild Turkey rare breed. It's a barrel proof, stunningly good standard whiskey. It's not super sweet, it's very much more balanced, brings some of that spice to the table. If you are someone who has been drinking for a while, Russell's 10 or Wild Turkey rare breed, both I think a little bit better options, but if you're a beginner, you're just trying to dip your toe into drinking whiskey neat, 1910 Woodford Reserve Double Oaked, I don't have a problem with any of those. We just happen to like the other ones a little bit better.
Next category, best splurge bourbon.
I'm drinking mine right here, actually. You know, we don't come here to mess around. For them, they said William LaRue Weller.
Great choice.
Great choice, if you're ever going to see that bottle. We don't expect to. And Buffalo Trace Antique Collection, all of those whiskeys are very much splurge whiskeys if you can get your hands on them. We're going to offer some that you might not have thought of that way. So let's get started with the one that's right here in this glass.
So I agree with Phil on this one.
For me, this is a $280 list price bottle. We've actually seen it considerably less than that, $240 in that neighborhood. 15 stars, fine aged spirits, platinum bourbon. And this is a blend of bourbons from Indiana, Kentucky, and Tennessee, 1915 and 10 years aged. And coming in at 98 proof, just a beautiful whiskey that will please any sipper at any level. If you're a beginner, maybe an ice cube in it, whatever. So good. And this one's actually something that we see on the shelf. If you've got $280 burning a hole in your pocket and you just have to splurge on something, this is a pretty good alternative to those BTAC products that, let's be honest, how many of those do you actually see out there?
I love that choice because I think 15 stars could have been my bottle of the year last year.
Yeah.
But for this splurge category, I'm actually going to go Cal 15, and I'm going to say 15. That's the one that I would go with. We find this bottle for $130 in Oregon. It's oaky, but there's tobacco, there's leather, there's deep spices, dark flavors. It goes away from my palate, which loves sweet candy. And it's like the one thing that if I'm looking for something truly with those dark, deep flavors, I gravitate towards it a lot. I just love it. And I think for $130, it qualifies for a splurge.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so decadent, so satisfying as a whiskey. And if you're going to spend a bunch of money on a whiskey, you really want it to be satisfying and delicious.
But if you can find the BTEC stuff, more power to you. Now we're up to best value bourbon, and they said Evan Williams Bottles and Bond, and I can't disagree with that.
Yeah, nobody's going to disagree with that, right? Whether you're a new drinker or you've been around the block, there's no denying it is a great entry point into whiskey. It is versatile. It is tasty. Absolutely.
Let's talk about some Wild Turkey.
Let's talk about some Wild Turkey 101 bourbon. This has been a mainstay on our shelf for years, 101 proof. We see this bottle $22-ish for 750 milliliters, but we've seen 1 liters for well under $30. Now that's a great value. We happen to prefer that flavor profile to the Evan Williams Bottled and Bond, one of those great versatile whiskeys we think is worth a shot if you haven't checked it out.
So the next two categories are cocktails and old fashions, and for me it could be a single category, but we're gonna break them down.
Right, yeah. So for cocktails in general, they say Maker's Mark 46.
Don't disagree.
Don't disagree. We've just got one bottle that we bought over and over again that we use for cocktails. We think it's a super versatile choice.
It's Evan Williams 1783. If you've watched this channel, you know that I talk about it all the time. I love drinking it neat. I love putting it in my old fashions. I like putting it in cocktails. When we talked about this category, I kept thinking, what cocktails do I actually do that are whiskey based? And usually I put a rye in it. So this actually was a little bit tricky to figure out, but 1783, you can't go wrong.
Right, super versatile whiskey. If you haven't tried 1783, the price is right, the flavor is right. Go check out that bottle.
So now we're on to old fashions, and you could throw 1783 in this one as well.
Because that's what we always do. Their best bottle for an old fashioned, Old Grandad 114. That's 114 proof whiskey. I do take a little issue with this. I love OGD 114. Do not get me wrong. That's a really strong whiskey. If you have a relatively new drinker or somebody that doesn't drink a lot of whiskey cocktails come to your house and you make them 2 old fashions with OGD 114, after the first one, they're probably going to be tipsy. After the second one, you're going to have to go around your house collecting the lampshades because he's probably going to be putting them on his head.
So our recommendation for the old-fashioned bourbon, 1783, of course. It's what I use. I always use. But if I don't have it, Maker's 46 is a great option, and also Bullet is a great option.
Yeah, Bullet bourbon, nice backbone on that whiskey, good flavor, it stands up in a cocktail. We don't think you can really go wrong in this category. Drink what you like.
So the next category is the best bourbon outside of Kentucky.
Best bourbon from outside Kentucky. This is such a personal preference, pride of place sort of thing. In our travels, we've discovered so many great distilleries, so many great bourbons. And the one on this list, I have to read it because it's a long name. Lost Lantern, Tom's Foolery, Ohio Straight Bourbon, 10-year-old single cask. We've actually tried this particular bottle. Somebody sent us a sample or two of it, and we really, really enjoyed it. We think that we can do a little better than that. Let's select something that you can actually find out there, maybe. Something that's not a single barrel, for instance. In my opinion, we can't talk about best whiskeys from outside of Kentucky, best bourbons that is, without talking about Still Austin in Texas. We're absolutely enamored with their whiskey.
We've never had a Still Austin bourbon that we haven't liked, but we especially like the cask strength.
Absolutely. If you can find the cask strength single barrels out there, more power to you. But yeah, Still Austin, the musician, their Bottled in Bond series, everything we've tried from them really hits our palate. And then there's one other distillery that I feel like we should mention here, and that's Highwire in Charleston.
We got to visit there last month, and we were blown away.
Absolutely. Their Jimmy Red Corn bourbon is a thing of beauty. We've fallen in love with that brand. We even have a single barrel coming out soon. Still Austin, Highwire, and whatever's in your neck of the woods. You know, there are so many great distillers in the country right now. Go out, visit your local distillery, see what kind of bourbon they got going on. I'll bet it's pretty good.
Next on the list is best cask-finished bourbon.
Right. Okay, we don't drink a lot of these, I will say. So they've got here Rabbit Hole Mizunara Founders Collection. Mizunara is a Japanese type of hardwood, and we've had several things aged in Mizunara that we've liked, including Barrel, which was a very fine option for bourbon. We've never tried this bourbon, and we don't drink a ton of cask-finished bourbons, but we do have a recommendation. It's hard to find, a little bit rare, but if you get to the Pacific Northwest, you can try Trails End 10, which is finished in Garyana oak barrels. That's one of our favorite bourbons of all time. So if you get to the Pacific Northwest, definitely give that one a shot. Other than that, we really don't have another recommendation on this one.
The next one was a little bit tricky. It's the best small batch bourbon.
Yeah, this is such a general category. They've got Michter's bourbon here, the Michter's US 1 Kentucky Straight Bourbon.
Great.
Very nice. Okay, I don't have a problem with that myself, but I do have a favorite small batch bourbon that comes all the way from Nevada. It's one of those bottles that I always want on my shelf. Smoke Wagon Small Batch. That's 100 proof whiskey, usually in the neighborhood of $50 to $55. The dry wood notes, the sweetness, the spice, very well balanced. I love Smoke Wagon Small Batch. Highly recommend that if you haven't tried it, but yeah, small batch, that's a huge category. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of suggestions for this one.
And the bottle is beautiful.
Yeah, Smoke Wagon bottles are always cool.
And you can't have one of these lists without the best Bottled in Bond.
Absolutely, 100 proof, 4 years aged. We love Bottled in Bond stuff. We think it's some of the best values that you're gonna find on the shelf. In this instance, we're not crazy about what they've gone with. Even though we think it is delightful, it's really hard to find a lot of the time. And when you do find it, it's a lot of times been marked up. We're talking about Colonel E.H. Taylor Small Batch.
So this is a bottle that has won blinds for us, so we totally get why they put it on the list.
It's just, it can be so hard to find.
Yes.
It can be so expensive when you do find it. We don't think it's a bad whiskey by any means. We quite like this whiskey. Heaven Hill 7-year bottled in bond bourbon. The first bottle we ever bought of the Heaven Hill 7-year bottled in bond, because it was really hard to find on the West Coast. We bought it in California for $70. I saw it in Chicago for $38.99 the other day.
We overpaid.
We know that this stuff is more readily available now than it used to be. And it's not for everybody. Some people say they're not a big fan of it. We quite like it. We think it's a versatile whiskey, and for $38.99, that's an absolute buy, in our opinion.
Hang with us, guys. 2 categories left. The next one is the best high rye bourbon.
I love their answer to this. Wilderness Trail High Rye. I have no qualms with that whatsoever.
No.
We do have a couple of other options here. Old Grandad 114. You were wondering where was that going to land on this list? Right here. I think that that's a great option.
And another option I think is great is Four Roses Single Barrel Bourbon.
100 proof, and what's not to like? Spicy, sweet, perfectly balanced. This is such a great whiskey. Some of you are getting this out there for $30. That's an unreal bargain.
Last but not least, best wheated bourbon.
They went all in on the Buffalo Trace on this list because now they're talking about Weller Special Reserve.
We get this bottle for about $30 in Oregon when we can find it, and it's great.
Yeah, very nice whiskey, fair price, I think, if you can get it in that neighborhood. We saw it for $99.99 in Alabama earlier today. That's a no.
That's a no.
Don't do that. Look, we're going to give you a couple of other options. The first one is one that was in our top 10 whiskeys of the year for 2024. Holiday Soft Red Wheat Rickhouse Proof Bourbon, produced in Missouri, of all places. You want to talk about great whiskey outside of Kentucky? That's a very tasty bourbon. We got the Rickhouse Proof. We haven't gotten into the rest of their lineup, the bottled and bond and some of the other things. We hear great things. We're eager to try a lot more from them, but that Rickhouse Proof bourbon is fantastic.
And we have to go back to the OG, Maker's Mark, and basically celebrate the whole line.
Yeah, absolutely. Maker's 46, I mean, that's on our shelf all the time. So versatile. But in addition, the single barrels are always very good. And you can find those out and about, usually, even in some of the more remote liquor stores we've been to. And also their wood finishing series, if you can find those bottles, they're fantastic. Maker's Mark, if you're talking about wheated bourbon, you have to include them in the list. And I think that that's the best place for us to finish this list. Out of these 11 categories, let us know, what are your favorites? What are you drinking this year in 2025? What's your most anticipated whiskey of 2025? And from wherever we are.
To wherever you are.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks for hanging with us this whole time.
That was delicious.
Want more Bourbon Van? Join us on Patreon for as little as $3 a month and get access to exclusive videos and live streams, music and whiskey pairings, and guaranteed opportunities to purchase our single barrel whiskey selections. Plus, obligatory Mavis photos with nearly every post.